Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Robert McDowall, and we're going to take a look at the States of Alderney budget and then move on to the UK's political and economic problems. And I'd like to point out this interview was recorded on the 24th of October. Robert, good to see you.
Good to see you. As you say, a day's a long time in politics.
We'll come on to that in a minute. Let's start off with the States of Alderney.
Yeah.
You were chairman of finance, and you did
Correct.
get a few things done in terms of repatriation of the TRP tax.
Correct.
Didn't quite get there as far as the rest is concerned because you decided to leave office. But
Correct.
In your view, what are the elements of an ideal budget? Is there such a thing?
Yes, an ideal budget both likes to present a positive cash flow in terms of revenues in and expenditure out. It also has to look at the future. In other words, what are its liabilities? What may be future tax demands? And also how the assets that you have may help manage the future expectations. That's a simple.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, as I see it, there are two variables as far as Alderney is concerned. First of all is congee. That's dependent upon the property market working smoothly, and you can't obviously depend on that.
No.
The second thing is, of course, the Alderney Gambling Control Commission, which
Correct.
I believe has gone through a slight improvement recently. But
Yes,
having said that, you can't actually say that's there for keeps.
No, you can't, because as I think perhaps I mentioned on a previous call, there's consolidation in the industry, and also different jurisdictions take different views as to how they want to manage gambling. So it's in one sense it's a windfall revenue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As far as expenditure is concerned, Alderney's on its own up to a point, isn't it, in terms of the fact that, you know, the money that's generated here has to go towards local services. But presumably, if we exceed that, Guernsey come in and top us up, do they?
Well, there were, if there were a deficit, and in my watch, we did have a very small deficit one year, about £16,000, and we actually borrowed from the coin reserve account.
Right. Well, that's what it was there for.
Yeah. So I mean, if it were much larger, one would have to take a more strategic view of it, I suppose. In other words, what reserves one could draw on. But that was an easy one.
But would Guernsey actually come back in and top up if necessary, do you think?
Well, I don't think they would automatically, particularly now we're in a sense responsible for our own taxation and expenditure in many respects. They would want us to search elsewhere for prospective revenues, whether that's through sale of assets or additional taxes. So I don't think they'd have the checkbook in their back pocket ready to write it out, frankly, Tony. and particularly in these times as well, where they've got their own struggles. Well,
that's right, absolutely. With the airport, we're talking about paying them back over a period of years.
Yep.
Is that recycling Guernsey money up to a point, or how do you see that?
Well, it's what I loosely call a soft loan.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's 10, 20, 25 years is, you know, obviously open to conjecture. But when you get a loan like that, inevitably inflation erodes the value of what's being repaid. And frankly, I think with those soft loans, there perhaps would need to be pauses in it if perhaps Alderney found itself in straitened circumstances.
Yeah, because they're sort of saying that the new runway would have a life of 15 years before you'd have to start paying out a lot of money again. So it's possible, isn't it, that you would be running behind the whole time on it?
Exactly. I mean, my other, it's not my own suggestion, but one or two suggestions come to me, is that the UK if it's got any money left, I should preface it, might make a contribution if the airport could be used for what I loosely call strategic defence purposes.
Yeah.
But obviously, to do that, one would have to present a case to the UK government. So there is that sort of possibility.
How do you see the public service obligation with Alderney panning out? Because that expires in what, 2 years' time, I think, something like that.
Well, it does, and I mean, you know, the states of Guernsey is the flyer of last resort.
Yes,
if I could put it like that. And I put it this way: there would be huge moral pressure on them to extend that PSO in absence of anything else. Alternatively, I suppose they could go to a third party and say, look, we will underwrite so much of it. So, but there is no automatic rollover of the PSO, Tony.
I think for the benefit of some of our viewers who are not Alderney or Guernsey residents, should explain that Alderney, our local airline, is owned by the states of Guernsey.
Yes, good point.
And therefore, from that point of view, we've all got a vested interest in it as stakeholders.
Exactly. And I suppose, again, depending on the circumstances, Alderney may have to raise a little more tax to support a new PSO or rolled over PSO. I think Guernsey would like to see Alderney helping itself a bit more. Yeah. Of course,
you sort of look at the Alderney website, Robert, and you see you get to Bristol for £9.99.
Well, yes.
If we want to go to Guernsey, it's 50 quid.
Well, yeah. There's a certain delicious irony in that, isn't there, Tony? And I suppose it's that they have spare planes or spare routes at certain times, and they're trying to encourage people to use it. It's a little undiplomatic, I suppose. Yeah.
Bearing in mind that probably our contribution per capita is a lot higher than people over on Guernsey. I would say in Alderney's defence that it costs a lot more than £9.99 to get back from Bristol to Guernsey.
Well, quite. You know, if you want a one-way ticket to Bristol, well, that's terrific. But most people want to come back.
Now, we've been talking recently, haven't we, about the fact that the accounting system used by both Alderney and Guernsey is antiquated, and Correct. That they really have got to take on board an international standard of accounting.
Correct.
I think that's happening, is it?
Well, very, very slowly in Guernsey. Guernsey passed a motion in 2012 that they would adopt international accounting standards. And in another context, I emailed the deputy chair of the Policy and Resources, Heidi Soulsby. She is an accountant. How is this going? And she said slowly, and they only have limited resources. They're hoping to bring it in, I think, in 2023 or 2024. The biggest challenge for the states of Guernsey is valuing the assets that the states has. You know, that's everything from sort of seashore, I suppose, to its buildings, and that seems to be rather a monumental job. And the idea would be, and I think you had Ian Carter on some weeks ago where you asked him about this, and he plainly said that Alderney doesn't have the technical capabilities to make that transition, and that they would follow in the slipstream of Guernsey and probably need Guernsey's accounting assistance for it. But this is very important because all both are doing at the moment is managing the cash in and out, you know, what comes in and what goes out. And there are some very interesting examples where, you see, Alderney doesn't have a balance sheet. So, for example, it came about that back in 2015, the States of Alderney lent AEL 1.2 million to upgrade the network.
Yeah.
Okay, that what was done, completed, and AEL, Alderney Electric, have it on their balance sheet as a current liability. And the state said, well, we don't have a record of it.
And it should be on theirs as an asset.
Exactly, but they don't have a balance sheet, you see. So that's just one example. The other thing is, of course, the closed pension fund is certainly a contingent liability, and perhaps the largest of all. And again, we don't even now get the publication of the closed States of Alderney pension fund, which is probably currently the biggest liability or prospective liability that states have. So all they're doing is managing the cash. They're not managing the assets or liabilities.
And Guernsey don't take into account their pension scheme deficit either, do they?
No.
We need to stress this is staff pension. It's not the old age pension or anything like that.
Staff pension. Yeah, the civil service pension.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that is a whopping great liability. I think they see it as a bit of accounting convention, frankly, on anything else. But of course, the point is, obviously, pension funds have suffered substantially over this last 4 or 5 weeks, and that is certainly going to raise the issue of how perhaps they cover future payouts from practical perspective. But we have no sight of that at all.
And of course, looking at it from Guernsey's perspective, if they don't take on these international accounting rules, and they don't acknowledge the fact that they've got a pension scheme deficit, which I don't think they do they? Because they haven't got a balance sheet.
No, they don't.
You know, the chances of them ever actually being able to raise additional funds through, say, the Bank of England, are not going to happen, are they? No.
The Bank of England, or if they want to raise another bond, the Guernsey bond, the 30-40-year bond, which was issued in, was it 2014, 2013? No, they're going to have difficulties, and obviously when their accounts are presented in international accounting standards format, I don't think it will help their credit rating, frankly.
Have they got one at the moment?
Yes, they do. It's one tick below the UK from recollection.
Oh, right, okay.
Whether if the UK has downgraded that will follow.
Have they gone down another tick, as it were?
I don't know, but clearly a new evaluation of them will be less happy than it was previously, because of course the money that they've had to spend out in COVID, and the fact that the policy resources say they don't have the money, quote unquote.
And the other thing, Robert, is of course that the Guernsey Social Security Fund, which pays the old age pensions and things like that, that is due to run out, I think, by about the end of this decade.
Yes, it was some years ago. It was going to run out about 2035, but you're right, because of various other factors, it will probably run out about 2030, 2031, and then they will be, as in the UK, they'd be reliant on revenues from taxation to pay out.
So it becomes pay as you go.
Pay as you go, exactly.
Yeah. How do you see the situation with Alderney taking on responsibility for primary health and long-term care following the purchase of the Ireland Medical Centre?
Well, I have two concerns about it. One is, I think the politicians should keep well out of it. Because they don't have the medical competence, and so they need to be very closely supervised or overseen on it. But secondly, in 2016 there was a Wilson report published which set out the needs of the Alderney from a health point of view, everything from sort of mental health to childcare sort of thing, and that was never acted upon. In my view, implementing that would be somewhere between 5 and 7 million, 5 and 8 million pounds. It can only be done over time. obviously, and that will grow with inflation and other things. And so that is going to be a challenge. And I think additional revenues may have to be raised for that in terms of what I call a hypothecated tax. So, we pay, 2 or 3%, but it will be dedicated to health. So because I honestly don't know financially how they're going to meet that challenge. And I don't think they do because they've not quantified the liabilities of that. So they've taken it on without quantification or without a plan as to what future expenditure may be over, let's say, 5 years, and what the where the corresponding revenues will come from. They need a lot of advice on that. They don't have the competence to do it.
Yeah, and of course, recently they sort of got St John Ambulance on board in terms of taking over and running the ambulance service, but that's going to be at a cost, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I mean, again, when it was done under the quote old St John's Ambulance thing, there was a grant from the states of £40,000 a year from recollection.
Yeah.
I think we did also give a grant to buy a new ambulance, sort of thing. But now we're back with it under the states. Clearly, it's going to be more bureaucratic and more costly. Yes, they've outsourced St John's Ambulance in Guernsey to oversee it, quite rightly so.
Yeah.
But there is going to be increased taxation as a result of that.
Yeah, very much so. Now, governance reform. We've talked about this a few times in the past, and it seems to have gone back onto the back burner, other than the fact that I note that if you're over 16, you can vote at the next election.
Yes, and I'm sure they look forward to that with enthusiasm.
But it does seem to me that they were promising that they would hold a debate in September and they get things rolling. They then go and start looking for the election that's coming up in November.
Correct.
And instead of offering a 2-year term, they're offering a 4-year term again. So that looks as if that can's been kicked down the road for a long, long way.
And in my view, that is so fundamental, because whoever is returned at the moment is basically shackled or handcuffed by the existing cumbersome, bureaucratic and ineffective governance procedures.
Yeah. What do you say then if there are insufficient candidates at this next election?
Well, that's kind of going to be an interesting one, and I'm afraid I've written an article on this for the local journal on Friday. But
I have to say, I thought you had.
but there are two things. One is the states is only quorate if it has 7 members.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, if they couldn't return 7, well, I think they would have to revert to some sort of external oversight.
Right.
If they got 7 or more, well, first of all, they have to make sure they weren't sick or away for states meetings, but it would demonstrate, I think, a lack of enthusiasm, lack of interest, disinterest by voters, and perhaps more importantly by people wishing to stand and participate in the states of Alderney.
Oh well, time will tell, as we usually say. Let's move on to the United Kingdom, shall we?
Oh, yes.
Because I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that Robert and I have discovered just before I pressed the record button that Rishi Sunak has been crowned. And,
yes.
I suppose that's got to be a good thing. But we get on to him in a minute if we can.
Sure.
I sort of headed this section as events, dear boy, events.
Well, indeed, we have too many of them, Tony. We want about 3 or 4 years of really dull and boring politics.
Yeah.
There's just been too much happened, and we've had a high-profile and colourful Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who in so many ways reminds me of Lloyd George. And he may be responsible for leading his party into the wilderness, which which Lloyd George did with the Liberals.
And that of course, was the end of them.
That was the end of them,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
That's right. And then secondly, we've had a prime minister who perhaps certainly doesn't quite understand some of the workings of finance and economics, because when you come out with such a highly contentious budget, there were some good things in it, you have to have the Bank of England at your side, ready to take market action.
Yeah.
Whether that's buying government bonds, whether it's providing liquidity to certain participants in the markets and other things, but it was a piece of real inept handling or mishandling, frankly, real inept, and it was downhill from then on.
And how much of it do you think really spooked the markets to the point where worldwide we saw significant dips?
Well, with two things. One is, of course, it spooked the pound, it spooked the government bond market, but more importantly, although the UK is not perhaps a major player in some of the international finance market, it does have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It does have a ripple effect. So there's not only concern about the UK's economy per se, but what impact this may have on other currencies and on other government bond markets. So there is worldwide concern about the prospective impact of it.
Did not she and the Chancellor have advice from the civil service on this? Well, it almost seems as if they sort of went ahead, without consulting anybody, let alone the OBR.
Well, of course, the first thing they did was sack the head of the Treasury. But he may have had some shortcomings, but I think that was a rather capricious move. They brought in advisors who take a political stance rather than an economic or monetary stance, and they've also exhibited deep frustration with the central bank. I think that's going to ripple on, actually, but they've really not handled it at all well with the civil service, not at all well. Changes of minister here and there. I don't know whether civil servants either tear the hair out or sit back and wait till the roundabout stops.
Yeah. I mean, surely no one in their right mind actually constructs a budget without running it past the Office of Budget Responsibility.
Well, precisely. So that's another ineptitude. Whether you agree or disagree with certain aspects of the Office of Budget Responsibility, and governments have in the past, you do go to them, and where there are differences, you explain why you disagree and how you will address this disagreement.
Yeah. But to actually have a situation where originally the OBR confirmation was going to actually appear in November.
Yeah, quite.
It's little wonder the markets went as they did.
Well, yeah. The markets, they're all over the place, and they just have to speculate on what the OBR might think or say, and that is still not entirely clear. Although I think clearly Jeremy Hunt, and let's hope he remains as Chancellor of the Exchequer. That would be very bad to move him. But he at least has a dialogue with them, and I would imagine is more in tune with what they'll be indicating.
And of course, he's scrapped most of it in any case, hasn't he?
He scrapped most of it. So what's it called, the unfunded tax reductions will be funded, and people have to pay for them.
Well, that's right, absolutely. So, in your view, gilt yields are now under control. I mean, obviously, we'll have to watch the markets, but
to the extent, yes. I mean, the government has to go out and borrow, and it has to make the borrowing attractive, particularly to overseas investors.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 1970s.
Me too.
Where they had to go out. They used to go out to the oil markets in the Middle East, which had a lot of money there, and they used to have to construct specific bond issues for the Middle East, so a higher coupon, interest paid gross, etc., etc. So you have to make the bonds attractive not just to domestic investors who, as you know from your bank, the pension funds require them to match assets and liabilities, but also to overseas investors, because you want overseas investors to, in order that you can inspire some confidence in investment from equity and other investors from overseas.
And those yields recently reflect an investment risk premium,
Yep.
don't they?
They do, and we hope it won't happen immediately. We hope on the basis that Sunak and Hunter are placed in position for 6 months or so, then there may be some stability and consistency.
I'm not sure quite where we stand on the triple lock. It's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. The last time I heard about it, Liz Truss was saying it was definitely going to be honoured.
It was honoured under the Truss regime.
The last bit of the Truss.
Yeah, the last bit of
the dying hours.
That's right. Well, as someone pointed out to me, the longest serving Prime Minister and the shortest serving Prime Minister both come from Norfolk. Walpole was the first.
And I have to remind our viewers that you come from Norfolk.
Norfolk, yes, exactly.
Must be something about it. Must be something.
Quite. Norfolk.
Here's one for you, Robert. Bearing in mind she only served for 44 days, should she have this Prime Minister's pension and allowance?
Well, morally she shouldn't, and she should not take it. But unfortunately, there was legislation passed, and so legally she is entitled to it. Morally, I don't think she is.
And do you think she will or she won't?
I hope she doesn't take it, is the best I can say. Let's hope her husband, Mr. O'Leary, he's an accountant, has a good job.
Oh dear. Do you see it as being 1997 all over again if we come up to a general election? Because, there are lots of parallels here, aren't there, between the last bit of Major and this current government?
There are. Well, I mean, what was interesting under Major, we had the ERM crisis, and which took the Major ministry to a low. But over the next 5 years, mainly as a result of Ken Clarke being the chancellor, I think, they done a turnaround by the time of the 1997 election, but people still remembered the ERM crisis.
Of course.
So I think, the Conservatives have got about 2 years to turn it round, and that's they've got to work really hard on that. But people will unfortunately still remember the winter of hardship, if I could paraphrase it.
Yes, yeah.
So I think there will be some time in a dark room in the wilderness where the Conservative Party will have to sit and reflect on what they've done and what their future should be.
Is that a bad thing? Do you think that governments eventually run their time and that sort of thing?
Governments do run out of steam, and whether it's Labour or Conservative, it seems to be about 13 years. We had it in the we had it in the Conservatives in the 50s and 60s. We had it under Thatcher. We had it under the Blair Brown regime. So each was 13 years, and we're 13 years now. It'll probably be 15 years, but yes, I think governments run out of steam. The people get tired, or those who competent or even incompetent have had their turn in office, and it's time to refresh the pack.
How long do you think they could run this energy subsidy? Because under the Truss Mark 1, it was going to be 2 years and involve a lot of borrowing and everything else. Jeremy Hunt comes in and slices it back to next April in terms of, how long they're prepared to prop it up. You can't prop it up indefinitely, can you? You
can't prop it up indefinitely, and external events will dictate matters. What worries me at the moment is, will the pound regain its strength up to 125 or 130, and that will be, in my view, the big factor at the end of 6 months when Jeremy Hunt sort of reviews the energy subsidy package. If the pound is still weak, then there may be a slightly amended lower packages, would be my view.
Because we've always got to bear in mind the fact that energy is priced in dollars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
And
Yeah,
that's where it always hurts.
That's where the kicker
Yeah.
lies.
Yeah.
So, and that in some ways is more important in this area than the end of the Ukraine war and other factors, frankly, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we did say events, dear boy, events, didn't we? So
Yeah. Well, a lot has happened since we last spoke, and
certainly has. Anyway, Robert, thank you so much for sparing me some time. As ever, it's been a pleasure to have a chat, and I'm sure we'll see you in a few months' time to chew the fat once again and tell us your views on various aspects of Alderney, the UK, and the world.
if there is any fat left, Tony.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you very
Cheers.
much. Take
Thank
care.
you.